shirt.
Do you see what's on it all?
Hey, Eric.
It's bugs.
How are you?
Maybe.
You breathing? You good?
But
You good? You think it's not 90 degrees out?
Here all morning.
Still, how could you be parched? I don't think you're using enough of your own product.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Everybody here? Oh, we're waiting for one more.
Oh, good.
We can start. Oh,
College.
There she comes.
now it has bugs.
Okay. I'm going to call meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Commissioner Morris?
Here.
Commissioner Glass?
Here?
Vice Chairman Hewitt?
Here.
Chairman Montano?
Here.
Commissioner Putnam?
Here.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Here.
Okay. Any announcements, Amanda?
I do not have anything to announce.
Okay. Consent calendar?
Actually, I do have one announcement. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It might be of interest. The city got a substantial grant from Caltrans to help pay to update our LCP to create an adaptation plan for sea level rise impacts on all of our transportation facilities. And so we'll be putting together an RFP and getting that project kicked off probably later on this summer. So we're really excited about that. It's another little piece of our LCP we'll be able to get updated. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, on the consent calendar for the June 19th actions. Everybody got the minutes? Okay. Would
Move to approve the
Okay.
consent calendar.
I'll second it.
call for a vote?
All ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstains? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Amanda?
Okay, our first item this evening is a site plan application at 261 East Whitley. The owner, this property is a duplex with 4 bedrooms, and they are requesting site plan approvals to add 9.
I'm going to go.
You need to
I'm within
recuse,
500 feet, so I'm going to step out. of this
abstain
one.
because you have a property interest.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So that means our alternate, Mrs. Hall, will be participating.
Okay.
Okay? So this is a site plan application to remodel an existing duplex with 4 bedrooms. They're going to be adding 974 square feet to the structure. It will still remain a duplex and a 4-bedroom property. So we received word from the applicant kind of late last week that they had initially thought they were going to convert it to a single-family dwelling, but they've changed their mind and they've decided they'd really like to keep it the duplex designation. So we gave you a revised floor plan that shows that the room that they were originally going to make solely a laundry room, they're going to now keep a small kitchenette in there in order to retain their duplex status. So we are recommending that you make the findings to approve the site plan. And excuse me one second.
So on that, so we're going to eliminate the laundry and keep the kitchen.
It'll be a shared use. It'll be a
Okay.
laundry room and a small
Kitchenette.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, I've got discombobulated. So this would, you would be making the CEQA finding that it's categorically exempt under section 15301E1 as an existing facility. And the applicant is in the audience if you have any questions.
Okay. I'm going to open up public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this item? You have any questions? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Anyone like to discuss this? Have any questions regarding this item?
I went up and looked at it, didn't seem unreasonable to me or anything. I actually like the fact now that he's keeping it as a duplex. I didn't have any problem.
I was there about an hour or two ago, and I spoke with the owner, and he said it was going to be a single-family dwelling at that time. So this is quite recent that you've changed back to duplex?
No, we bought it as a duplex. It has, 2 electrical meters, 2 gas meters. We were always planning to keep it that way.
I think the confusion may have arisen to where, in speaking to Mr. Van Avery, that the intent currently is that his family's going to use it, and that eventually it may go back to actually functioning as a duplex. But for now, they would be using the entire property.
So they just don't want to lose that status that they already
Right.
have.
Yeah, well, that's fine, that it would be a duplex or a single family. It's a good-sized piece of property either way, but the problem I had was the parking. That I understand that it's close to being 50%. It's probably 50 square feet off,
Right.
and that's a tricky street for no parking. You know, I mean, you're one way, it's got to get fire trucks down there. Every spot is plugged every night. So,
There's 2 addresses, correct?
No.
No, it's just the one, even though it's a duplex.
It's a duplex, but it doesn't have separate addresses.
So then they're only, if it doesn't have separate addresses, is
As a
it,
duplex, they can register 2 golf carts. They've always been able to register 2 golf carts.
Well-
And this will not change that.
right,
So it's the
because
same-
it's a
same
duplex,
as-
yeah.
It's
the
the same
status.
parking impact tomorrow as it is today.
right, but they're on that cutout across the street that's public.
Correct.
So, and that, the neighbors up the street use it. There's a renter there that parks, and
Well, and I think too, if Mr. Van Avery's family doesn't live here full-time and they have vehicles, they'll have to find somewhere to park them off the street. If they live here full,
Yeah, you get ticketed.
yeah, even the little cutout across the street is probably public parking, as you said. So, but if they live here full-time, then they would have the same rights as anyone else to park on the street. Their vehicle would not be restricted.
so if they lived here full-time and they were in that parking spot every night, what would happen? They'd get
Nothing.
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 They're still subject to the 72-hour rule that
Okay,
everyone is
72
subject to.
hours, yeah.
But if you live here full-time, you have a right to park on the public street. Just like everywhere in town, you have that right. Where the restriction comes in is if you don't live here year-round, then your vehicle gets the type of sticker that requires it to be off the street overnight. And that would present a challenge for his family if they wanted to register vehicles and they don't have off-street parking. They would have to arrange for parking somewhere else.
I guess I'm gonna add to, when I originally looked at the plans, it had the laundry room. I understand we changed it. With the new plans today, that was the new notice saying that. I like that it was a single-family dwelling. I wasn't sure about the duplex part. I was worried that who's gonna be down there, more family members? Is that the plan? Just your family will be there?
The room down below,
Mr. Van Eyden,
Can you come to the?
excuse me, if you can come up to the podium, that way the people at home
I'm
can hear
gonna
you.
reopen the public hearing.
Yeah. Thank you.
yes, the room down below, it doesn't have a closet, it doesn't really have anything. What my wife wanted to use, and there's no way to get to it from inside the house, either houses, as it exists now. What it is basically a hobby room. And my wife likes to, she'll use it for, wrapping gifts and doing sewing and all that kind of stuff, and she can just leave it down there. It was kind of the idea for our use.
Okay.
But the next person that comes along and wants to rent it, it does have an outside exit.
Well, it's way down below, though. You'd have to go.
People are desperate.
There's no way it could ever be an exit to that room from the outside without going through either the main house or the secondary house, because it sits all by itself down in the yard.
Well, as you explained to me, that all you had to do was put up a barrier and you could use that gate.
You could, and then you could use that other house, but still you couldn't get to that room without going outside.
Well, I like the plans. I think it'll look great, and having bedrooms facing out that direction, and then change your whole front to the bay side, so I thought that was great. The issue with the parking, I didn't feel there was an issue. I feel like you have that spot right there, right outside your house for one golf cart. So I was for that. That was my only comment.
Any other questions? I'm gonna close the public hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve with the two conditions.
I'll second that.
Call for vote?
Commissioner Hall?
Because of the parking issue, I would vote no.
Commissioner Morris?
Yes.
Commissioner Glass?
Yes?
Chairman Montano?
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda,
Yes, ma'am.
on to the next item. Thank you.
I am gonna go ahead and grab everybody else.
Oh, thank you.
Get your exercise tonight, huh?
I'm gonna go get Jack and Nora. Alex asked me to remind everyone to speak into your microphone, please. Okay. So our next item is a public hearing for an application for a conditional use permit for transient rental in the coastal development permit to allow the renting or leasing of rooms in the upper unit at 150 Middle Terrace. The owner applicants are Jack and Nora Tusi. This is in the medium density residential zone.
Okay,
I'm sorry, we did receive one letter in opposition that I'd like to read into the record, if I could, please. It's in your packet, but I'll read it in. This is in opposition to the application for transient rental permit at 150 Middle Terrace. Dear Commissioners, I am adamantly opposed to the granting of the application for transient rental at 150 Middle Terrace. My family home is next door at 156 Middle Terrace. I was born and raised here, and now I get to spend summers here with my grandchildren. Middle Terrace has always been predominantly a quiet residential neighborhood. The addition of another transient rental will change that. Of the 14 houses on Middle Terrace, 2 are already transient vacation rentals. Invariably, people who rent the homes for a few days at a time are less respectful of the neighbors than those of us who live here. Short-term renters are often fine people, but they're on vacation and celebrating it. It's human nature. It is definitely not behavior I find attractive, nor do I want to live next door to it in retirement. Avalon offers a variety of vacation accommodations that there is a glaring shortage of permanent housing stock. There is an essential incongruity here. I fail to understand how it can be in the interest of a community where permanent housing is already a problem to allow more transient rentals than already exists. Consequently, I am opposed to the application before you. Unfortunately, I cannot be at your meeting to make these points in person. I sincerely appreciate you taking them into consideration in this form. Respectfully, Paul H. Reed at 156 Middle Terrace.
Is that the blue with the,
I believe it is, if you're standing in front of Middle Terrace, I believe it's the home to the left.
the one that's on the market, the blue tile?
No, it's the
The
immediate,
one on the right? Oh, if you're standing in front, okay.
if you're standing on Middle Terrace and looking at it, I believe it's the home to the left.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I've got a clarification.
Yes, sir.
This saturation map, the little circles means those are CUPs right now? And
Yes,
the
that means
stars
that they are
below.
existing, and the star means that's the 150 Middle Terrace.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you guys have any?
And the other question that was asked, that Mr. and Mrs. Tucci have requested this be granted as a 3-bedroom property. The 3rd bedroom, which I gave you a copy of the floor plan, is actually a, on the plans when it was developed, was listed as a sunroom. And so if you are voting positively on this application this evening, we would recommend that you condition the occupancy on the confirmation by the building official that that sunroom meets the definition of a bedroom.
So, okay. Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Would anyone like to discuss this item in the audience? No? Okay. Excuse me?
This one.
You're more than welcome to come up and speak.
Regarding this one.
It's on this.
It's on this item.
No, that's what I was just asking.
Oh,
She wants to speak on CUP.
In general, but for this one.
We have a, Debbie, we have a business from the audience at the end of the agenda.
Okay,
And so that would probably be the best time.
okay, not before you consider these CUPs?
we're discussing this item. I mean,
If you want to talk about if you have overall concerns about CUPs, but that may be applicable to this one, then now's your time to talk about this one. Well, if you don't speak now, then this one is going to be acted upon.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. First off, I want to let you know that this map is incorrect that I received today. There are vacation rentals that are not on here, on our street at least on Descanso. And I'd be more than happy to go over that with you at another time. Okay.
oh, can you please state your name, please?
Debbie Wright, I live at 210 Descanso.
Thank you.
Okay. In the past year, more than 28 towns in California have banned or restricted short-term vacation rentals in residential zones. These include Laguna Beach, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Napa, Temecula, Santa Monica, Monterey, and South Lake Tahoe. Those are just a few. And I'd like to point out, these are all tourist towns that I just mentioned, just like we are a tourist town. Then there's San Antonio, Texas, Portland, Maine, Seattle, and even Maui, who have put strict restrictions on vacation rentals. New Orleans issued a moratorium on short-term rentals because it was getting out of control. San Diego, like many cities, is putting it on the ballot in 2020. San Antonio is limiting density saturation to 1 property per 8 per block. Unlike our street, where we have 3 behind us, we have 3 in front of us, and we have them on the sides. We regulate the number of cars on the island with an up to 20-year waiting list, yet CUPs are handed out like candy in this town. I understand that the tourists are the lifeblood of this town. I also understand that property owners should have a right to do what they want to their own property. But I'm asking you to at what expense? To those of us who live here, who have lived here a long time, who have long-term family homes, and between the unbearable parking in the flats and the vacation rentals that we constantly have to call the sheriffs on, I'm asking you at what expense? I guess that's really all I have to say. So I'm just asking you, as you go through this process that you do on every CUP, that you take into consideration those of us who live here full-time, who don't make money off of the tourists. Where do we come into the whole picture? Because we can't park where we live. We can't park where we pay property tax. We have to constantly call the sheriffs on the houses who butt up against our bedroom behind us and on either side of us. So again, at what expense do you pass these CUPs time and time again and hand them out like candy? I don't understand. There used to be a moratorium, and the moratorium has gone away. And I don't understand that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Anyone have any discussions regarding this item?
The letter here in opposition states that there's, 14 houses and 2 rentals. If I look at the saturation chart I'm given here, I counted 15 and 3, which, if those numbers are correct, that would have us at 20% saturation on that street. And if we add in this extra, it'll go up to 27%. I just want to throw that out as, I think that's way too much. You're looking over, 27%. You're over a quarter of the properties being vacation rentals. I think that is an extreme negative impact on the community. That's my comment.
I just want to double check on this picture with the star in the bottom window. So are we talking about the bottom unit that they're going to, or the
It's the top unit.
It's the top.
It's the top unit.
But the star is just something extra.
The star is a separate unit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
There's 2 units. It's a duplex.
Correct. The
And
home
so
is,
it's the top unit is the one that they want the vacation.
the home is 3 levels, or 4 if you count the little sunroom on the roof. The bottom level is a single level. It's currently rented to LA County sheriffs. And then the top level is the main house. And that's what the transient rental permit is for.
So this property is currently being rented out to
Your
island
full-time,
residents full-time, the bottom?
The bottom unit is. It
Oh.
has been for a long time.
And where do they park?
There's in the front of the house, there's parallel parking for a couple of small vehicles, and they have a garage.
Yes.
Jack, if you want to come up to the mic. If you,
Wait.
And then the rental, the CUP is going to come with the golf
No,
course?
it does not.
So how are they getting up and down? They're just coming up and walking or all the way down and around, or is there a shortcut for those people to get downtown? How are they getting downtown?
There's stairs that shortcut.
There's stairs that go
stairs,
up.
the public stairs are right next door, adjacent to this property.
Yeah.
But I'm just checking, that's what we're expecting and that's what they're going to be doing?
Well, it also shows that this is currently owner occupied.
Well,
They were the last ones to move.
so that means that they meet the requirement of not renting it out for 2 years. So that's the whole thing on,
says it's owner occupied full-time, so it hasn't been vacant 2 years.
They own it. It's their, it's not like they're paying themselves rent.
I know.
So it's not like they're kicking,
They
so.
bought
I think-
another home that they've moved into.
I'm aware of that,
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't know why it says it's owner occupied now, full-time. That's I'm
Gotcha.
just curious. If it's owner occupied, maybe it's somebody else, I don't know, but I was curious. Just to say it hasn't been rented is one thing, that doesn't say that.
That was a typo on my end. The bottom unit, like Amanda had mentioned, it's rented out to sheriffs, and they are the owners, and they were living there, but they no longer live there.
No,
So
I
it's
know
not
that.
owner occupied at the
That's why I
moment.
wondered why it says
So
it's-
this was-
It's owner occupied full-time as we speak.
So it was an
So
error.
I just didn't
It was in the
understand why.
past, not anymore. That was a typo on my side.
So we'll have to amend that. Any,
I've looked at this, and you've got one of your units right now filling year-round housing for someone, which is what the planning commission's always talking about, what the
Yeah.
public always is. Now you're asking for the other one as a CUP. I don't see a problem with it. You're providing one year-round housing unit to someone. I don't know of any of us up here that are doing much of that. So I
And then-
personally don't see a problem with it. You know,
And then the sentence on the housing statement reads, "The above listed property has not been rented on a non-transient basis because it was owner occupied full-time." So I think it's kind of a past tense. It has not been rented on a non-transient basis. It's because it was owner occupied.
no one's getting kicked out of it to make a vacation rental.
Exact, that's the intent of the question, is if you're evicting tenants.
Yeah, and I guess my observation on saturation in this project, I think one thing it's interesting that it is well distributed compared to the other rental units. When you look at
Up
it,
there.
it looks pretty evenly. So if saturation meant clumping, then it's not clumped. It seems like it meets that, and hopefully we can really get into saturation and define it more clearly later. But for me right now, I'm thinking that looks not so saturated based on geography, even though the overall neighborhood,
right.
27%.
I guess it depends on if we define saturation as
That's
a
exactly what I was
percentage
just gonna say.
over 25% or,
Well, we don't have anything
Clumping.
that says, we don't have anything on the books that says a certain percentage, a certain number, that's.
No,
So-
and I think that all I was going to say is, this is, this is really clear. Micah figured out that it was 27% of the, of this, that would be a rental unit. And so I just want to keep this discussion and this, what we just did here, as a part of the conversation we intend to have later.
Okay.
Yoli, excuse me, Chairman Montano, we have a late arrival of a nearby neighbor, I think, that wanted to speak? Yes. Okay,
Only open up the public hearing.
thank you.
Thank you. I'm Howard Hugo, and I live at 108 Middle Terrace. And I'm here to speak in support of the applicant. We live next to a short-term rental, and by and large, it's been great. And people have come and had a great time. They're out on the deck. They've enjoyed their families. And if there ever is a problem, we can call the rental company, and they will deal with it. If we had in general, all our neighbors are great up and down the street, but if we did have a full-time rental, if we had a full-time, whether it's a renter or owner next to us, we couldn't call anybody, because 2 days later, they're still our neighbor. And there's that tension that you don't want to get into. And so in many ways, to have the short-term rental is kind of a positive, because if we've got a bad situation, they leave in 2 days. They're not here for the next 2 years or 4 years. So it really is a positive. And we've had some really enthusiastic visitors next door, and by and large, they've been very friendly and happy, and they're on vacation. And the other thing I just want to say is that 100 years ago, I don't know what you would name the most powerful economic city in the United States, but it was Detroit. Today it's bankrupt. You can kill the goose that lays the golden egg. And I just want you to know that there are very few things that we have here that provide us an economic engine. And tourists, the hospitality industry is one of those. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? I'm gonna close the public hearing. And a positive note on your year-round renters downstairs is the sheriff's department. So,
That's a very good.
so that's a good thing. So I'm sure it won't get very out of hand if there are visitors in there.
Guy shows up with a gun.
So anyhow,
I'm going to add a little bit to this, because I appreciate that the bottom unit's being rented out to year-round tenants. That's great. But having, not just this house, but any house up on upper, middle, or lower terrace, I'm still against, because I do think it affects the quality of life of the people around there that are there all the time. So I think it's still going to be an issue. It's still going to be noise. It's going to be an issue. Anything up on the hill.
the thing about that, I'll have to disagree, because it's just, to me, when we talk about saturation, just the flats. The terraces are not exempt from conditional use permits because they are the terraces.
I understand.
So I feel different about
I'm
that.
looking at the house individually.
Yeah, exactly, but I'm just saying, like, I know since there's not very many permits up on the hills, because, I don't know, we haven't had very many applications, but I'm on the other hand looking at, since there's not very many up there, that they shouldn't be exempt from an application that comes in that is within the municipal code. It's a standard application, they follow everything, they comply with everything, and just because it's a terrace that we feel that they're
Not just that
exempt.
it's a terrace, but it's the quality of life. And one of the requirements was that if it affected the quality of life of the neighbors, and I believe it will. That's my
I
last
want
statement on
to
it.
input
Okay.
something, okay? Both sides,
I'm going to open the public, state your name, please.
okay, both sides of my neighbor, they be there. They hardly come on either side, so I don't think it will be hurting on the neighbor noise or anything. They never be there. Once in a while, they come for a couple of days on both sides.
Thank you. Any
Any
questions?
noise of their travels.
Thank you, Nora. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I guess it doesn't matter which way it goes, we get to vote on it. But I'd like to move to approve with the standard conditions put on by staff, including the one to verify if the bedroom is a bedroom.
Third bedroom.
That was at one time described as a sunroom, and that it would be the normal 2 persons per bedroom.
I would, and I would also like to, I'm sure it is part of the permit is the.
Actually, that's my
Sorry.
motion,
We-
and we'll see if it gets a second. Or
I just wanted to
do you
know.
want to modify this motion?
Well, I want to modify it to also include another condition. That,
I'm open.
okay, if that's okay. It's about the cart too.
Oh, and that no cart be
Right.
permitted. Thank you. Okay, is there a,
I'd second it.
Wait, did you open?
The motion is to approve verifying the third bedroom, restricting use of a cart to your transient guest. You would not be able to provide a vehicle to your transient guest. You can't provide a golf cart for your rental guest to use. You can own a golf cart for the property, but you can't include it in the rental, is the motion that's made.
Can you speak in the microphone, please?
Come up, Jack. Come up,
Jack, yeah, come up to the mic and explain.
Jack Tucci, come. Are you concerned about parking on the street? Because we have a garage.
well, I guess.
A door-closed garage.
Do you want to provide a golf cart with the rental?
We may. I never thought about it until you said no.
So you want that option?
And my other question
If
would
the
be,
option's there, I'd like it.
how many carts
But
are permitted for the property?
Two.
Two. So if they have a renter and they have a middle, this middle unit, and then they have, there's 3 units
No,
in here?
there's two.
There's 2 units.
2 units.
So he has a garage,
Right.
and then he also has a space to have you, did you go up there? It
Uh-huh.
has a kind of a big space in front of the whole.
And I guess the intent of the motion was, if I may, was it is typical, except in Hamilton Cove, to restrict, not always, but typical to restrict the golf cart.
Let's clarify what the code says.
I'm just going to go to what the condition of approval that is in your packet, which is on, there's no page number. Off-street parking shall be provided on or off the site such that all vehicles bearing permits issued for the unit can be parked off-street except when used pursuant to a temporary permit issued to the owner. That's for something else. So your standard condition says that basically if they're going to rent this up in this area, because it's not the flats, that parking has to be off-street. And so so you could either prohibit parking, you could either prohibit a cart, or you could require that if there is a cart, it has to be parked in the garage on the unit, and you can make it that specific.
So I'll say, given that information, I'll pull back that part of the request. And is that okay to the second?
I would second it,
So if
because
it's
of
parked
where you are
outside.
too, you're gonna.
So it has to be parked, if they're going to offer it, it has to be parked in their garage. Is that first and second?
First and second.
And I'd second it.
My question on that is, as we all know, every time you approve.
Come to the.
Come to
Debbie,
the podium,
to the
please, and I'm
mic,
gonna-
please,
I did
so
it.
everybody else
I'm
can
not
hear.
going to speak in front of people, so excuse me.
No worries.
Every time you approve, and I get Hamilton Cove because it's so, so far removed. But every single time you approve a new rental unit, you're impacting what's happening in the flats. And you know that because you park on our street, you know how it's impossible to get a parking space. So you're not going to be able to control, even though you say you can only park this vehicle here. You can't take it into town and park on the street. That's never going to happen. We all know that because they're going to take that cart down into town and they're going to park it in the street. And we don't have enough parking as it is. It's such an ongoing battle. And that's a real concern for me.
Right, and in this case, they can drive it into the
Yes,
street
they
and
have
park
the
it on
right.
the street. They just have to park it overnight in the garage.
And my
But see,
question-
here again, we're impacting the parking in the flats.
But
Correct.
there's
If it was a
two,
year-round rental,
it
you'd
would
be
have a
impacting
cart
the
as
parking in
well.
the flats too. If
Yeah, So
someone
there's
was
no
living
way
there-
of you regulating
because there's
that.
It'd be
two cars,
365.
yeah. There's 2 cars already that they are allowed to have.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 units. So whether it's a vacation people or year-round renters, there's gonna still be 2 vehicles that are still gonna be coming into town to go grocery shopping, to go down to the, that's part of owning a home. You have a vehicle,
Yeah.
whether it's someone coming for 2 nights or someone staying here 365 days a year. There's
Yeah.
gonna be 2 vehicles no matter what.
In the future, can you guys revisit that at some point and maybe
We're
take a look at
discussing,
that?
yeah, we're
I
discussing
urge you
right
to,
now.
to stay, as part of our agenda
Yeah.
this evening, is we're talking about saturation.
And impact.
And
I got a lot to say about that.
Well,
Okay,
wonderful.
well, I'm
You're at
glad
the
you're
right
here.
place.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion and
Where do
second.
the police park?
They can park anywhere on a street because they're an emergency vehicle. They can park in the red, they're an emergency vehicle. Even Edison Company can park anywhere, even if they don't have stickers, because they're an emergency vehicle for the city.
But that would impact Middle Terrace parking.
It's on their property.
It's on their property.
They have space for it.
They have some,
Yeah, but you're talking
Yeah, they
2,
have-
3 vehicles on that property?
If we're going to have public comments, you have to do it from
Actually,
there.
I'd like to call for a vote.
Yeah.
I kind of
Okay,
feel like.
there's a first and a second.
So, wait, I have a question. So, I just want to make something clear really fast. Janie can participate up there because we have a quorum here?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
She can participate as a member of the public. When
Okay.
she's not
Okay.
the alternate, she's a member of the
Yeah, I
public.
know, but it's just kind of confusing
I know,
when
that's
we're
why,
all
that's
up
why I
on the
just,
thing.
to
and-
clarify.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be very careful.
All right, so I'm closing
I'm
the public
watching you.
meeting, and your motion? Okay, calling for a vote.
Commissioner Morris?
Okay, no.
Commissioner Glass?
Yes,
Vice Chairman Heward,
Yes?
Chairman Montano,
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes.
Commissioner Patterson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Phillips.
No.
Okay,
Can I add that you just, on the recommendation that we
Yeah, the
correct
three
that?
thank you.
Okay.
Caught that.
Thank you. Okay,
Next item, you have to leave the room unless you're going to personally speak on the
Oh.
item. If you're going to personally speak on it, you can sit in the audience, but you have to speak. All right. Okay.
okay, Amanda.
Our next item is a transient rental application for a conditional use permit and a coastal development permit to allow the renting or leasing of a room or rooms at 45 Gaviota. The owner is Bart and Julie Glass, and this is part of the Hamilton Cove condominium complex. We are recommending that you make the findings to support the conditional use permit and the coastal development permit. And I'm sorry, I wanted to call out, how many bedrooms is it? 2 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms, so the occupancy limit would be 2 per bedroom plus 2, since we are thankfully out of water rationings. So the applicant is in the audience if you have any questions.
I'm going to open the public hearing. Would anyone like to discuss this item?
My wife and I live there full-time. One of our kids is in college in her senior year. Another one's in high school here in her senior year. We're going to travel a little bit more. Most of our stuff's going to be gone in the wintertime because I'm obviously busy in the summertime working there. There's a lot of them in my building. I'm around them all the time. My company would handle the management of it. It's a very nice property. I don't want it to be trashed. I don't want to put in people that are going to be loud, obnoxious. Obviously, it's my company. I don't want any of that stuff. But if you guys had questions for me, I'd be happy to answer for you.
Anybody have any questions?
And obviously, this includes a cart.
Yes. Yep.
And Hamilton Cove has their own parking per unit, right? They have it all assigned and
It has
everything?
its own
Okay.
parking space and everything like that.
Is the cart, you can take it to town on any hour, it's an overnight, it could be overnight parked in town?
If I used, I have a second cart, which is my commercial cart, but yeah, I would have to use my residential cart for it.
Since he lives here year-round, his cart would have the appropriate sticker to park on the street.
I would see no reason for him to park downtown overnight because they're staying at Hamilton Cove. I don't see, other than someone drinking and parking it, in which case I would say that would be great for all of us.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing.
No, you can sit.
Anyone like to talk about this item? Have any questions or concerns?
I do not on this one.
No? Okay, would anyone care to make a motion?
Wait, 1 sec. I just have another at one time, we were going to look into the etymology of Hamilton Cove, why every unit has a cart that can come to town, and that changed from what was 4 units could have a cart at one time. We were going to look at the history of that. Didn't you say that, Eric?
My
No?
my recollection, Commissioner, was that when the project was originally approved way back in the dark ages, they imposed a requirement for a pool of autoettes. Then years passed, the properties became more fully occupied, and the owners came to the city council and said, we want that restriction removed. We feel the position was that they felt they had the same rights as every other property owner in Avalon to be able to register an autoette, especially the distance that they were from town. And so the city council agreed, and they removed that restriction.
And the original plan, I think, because my father was on the planning commission, was there was not to be a gate. It was not going to be a gated
I don't
community.
recall.
So many things have gotten changed through the years on this, and it
But-
would be interesting to see the,
But I would hazard a guess that almost all the units out there, except the few that are occupied year-round, they all have stickers that where they have to be parked off the street at night. They regulate the autoettes through
yeah.
residency
Well, I'm
and
more
their sticker.
concerned with the traffic in town.
Right.
On a Saturday afternoon when maybe every visitor in the world at Hamilton Cove wants to go for a sightseeing ride, and so does every car rental, and so does, you know, the blinker, the single blinker. So I don't know if I want to approve even Hamilton Cove anymore, because I think that's gotten to be a problem with quality
You
of
have to
life.
keep an open mind and pursue and apply the rules which say that you can't, you shouldn't make
Well, it's
blanket.
a quality
you
of
shouldn't
life issue.
But you can't make those.
You shouldn't make blanket
Statements,
statements
because
that
if
you're not going to oppose
somebody-
it because the council has set the rules and someone could argue that they've been denied due process if you can't be fair. I'm just cautioning.
Oh, okay.
Because you're coming in here already saying you're not gonna approve any of Hamilton
Well,
Cove.
isn't this the discussion we're having, though, on
But
why we
we're
would
not having that discussion right now. We have an applicant in front of us with a legit application who is coming to us for a fair hearing, and we have to give them a fair hearing, according to the
Could
municipal
include a
code.
no vote.
Yes,
Yes.
but yes, it could include a no vote. Well, I'm just saying that if you say I'm never going to vote for any CUPs.
I'm having
That's-
trouble with that.
I
yes.
understand that, but that's not what the rules are.
And that's not what you just stated on record. We are here to give a fair hearing to every applicant. And if we can't, then we shouldn't be here. Call for a vote? Make a motion?
Make a motion in a
I'll
second.
make a motion to approve as submitted with the standard conditions as put on by staff. Hopefully that's,
That's adequate, thank you.
I'll second that one.
Call for vote?
Commissioner Hall,
No.
Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner, Vice Chairman Hewart,
yes?
Chairman Montano,
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes.
Commissioner Patterson,
Yes?
and Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Amanda, I think we are
So we're on to our
done
two
with our
items of
action
discussion.
item.
So we have,
On to a discussion.
yes, ma'am. So our first item of discussion this evening, and I will just remind the commission, these are items of discussion. Any direction that you give us, we would be coming back to take any action that would require coming back with the appropriate resolutions and appropriate public notices. So these are just items of discussion. The first one is our continuing discussion about transient rentals. The commission had requested some additional information to assist you in determining if you want to change how we manage saturation. You had asked us for how the properties are rented on a daily basis, how many days a year they're rented. We went to the finance department and we were able to provide you with that data for 181 units, I think it is, out of the 288 that are active. The finance department collects that daily information via paper forms, but it's not tallied. But thankfully, CIVR actually provides that information when they submit their TOT reports, and so we were able to take all of CIVR's properties, put it into a database, and combine all the last 12 months of their rental information. So I provided you with a spreadsheet that is, one of them includes Hamilton Cove, one does not. It was suggested that we give you numbers that excluded Hamilton Cove because there's not a high level of concern about saturation out there in that complex. So then we also sorted those two databases into by street address and then by the percentage of days that it's rented. So the street address would give you an idea of how many there are, at least in this group, per street. And then the percentage rentals would give you an idea of how often a property is rented based on the information in this sampling. You only have about 4 properties that rent more than 50% of the year. It goes steadily downward as you go down the list to where you have some properties that are only renting a few days a year. So we provided that information to you. So I think we also, Scott's staff were able to go out and query a lot of other cities and what they're doing with their transient rental codes and regulations. Mrs. Wright also mentioned there's a lot of cities out there, so it is a very prevalent issue in cities on how to deal with the short-term rentals. You have some cities that restrict it to what they call home shares or hosted rentals. That means the owner is in the home and they're just renting out either an accessory dwelling unit or a bedroom in their home. And some cities only allow that type of rental. That means the owner's on the property. Some cities have imposed caps. Some cities have imposed particular zones. They only allow it in certain areas. So there's been a lot of different ways where cities have tried to control how this use is happening and where it's happening and how it impacts their residential areas. I think we've recognized in the years that we have struggled with this, our residential areas aren't really separated from everything else, and that makes it very difficult for us. So this evening we'll ask that you talk about the information and see if you have some different ideas on how you would want to approach saturation. We've talked about mentioning doing it by block, which might be more representative than of a larger saturation in a larger area because your blocks are kind of like your mini neighborhoods. We could propose a cap on the whole city. Then however many we have, they're spread out all over the city and they're not restricted. So it's something for you to discuss and direct staff.
Can I ask a question? Is
Yes,
this
ma'am.
tied at all to we're only going to talk, because I don't know how we can talk saturation without talking about making this a land use entitlement.
No, we're already moving forward with
Okay,
eliminating
so-
it as a land use entitlement. That ordinance is being worked on, and we'll have that for your consideration
Okay.
either in August or September.
All right,
So
because okay,
So
good.
that's already done pursuant to the direction of the commission, and we're working on that, so it will no
All right.
longer be a land use entitlement.
But that's only moving forward.
That's only moving forward.
But I do want to say, too, that on these last two, I just want to bring up a comment that was made by one of the applicants that the people on either side of her, I mean, I'm happy to say that, but when comments are made about this is the way it is now, nobody ever comes, they're hardly ever here. I think all of these have to be looked at with thinking about the future. So that was the other thing, and I'm in my heart, I would say until this is all figured out, I would ask for a moratorium, but I felt hypocritical not approving, looking at what the rate of numbers per street in the flats versus what is on the Middle Terrace. I have a hard time. I think I don't think that the terraces should be excluded, that, it's okay to sacrifice the flats, but not the terraces. I just wanted to say that.
So I'm going to just go over two legal kind of overviews of this. One's actually not legal, it's more of a historical. The council has considered moratoriums at least 3 times in the last 10 years, and they've always said no. So you need 4 votes for that. There hasn't been that support yet. With respect to what you can do. It's wide open. You could ban them, you could regulate them, you could just allow them. So you have wide discretion on what you can do. You could even ban, have saturation via blocks, or via clusters of blocks, or via, most cities do it via zones. No city that we could find does it by blocks or by locations of blocks. It's by zones, but that doesn't mean that you could do that. You would be the first to do it, as far as we know, but that's legally allowable to do. So you have a wide palette of police powers that you can exercise on this, and it's up to you to provide us direction, and then we'll move forward.
I guess I have an idea. I'll just throw it out. And I guess based on the comments we get and our undefined definition, or not defining saturation, I would like to make a proposal on what saturation is. And I would say that maybe that's where we are right now, but not make a moratorium or anything, just say whatever the count is by now and is saturated. So the only way a new one could come in is if someone left. And there are two things I would add to that, though. One is it's going to be a little tricky to come out with what is actually right now. So what I would do is, say we'll use the best available information, and that'll give us a number, and then add 5% to that. And the reason is that way, if we find as we go through this process, well, there was a little more, a little less, we've sort of covered that base. The other thing is, I think it would make sense to do it by neighborhood, not by block. It's a little too tight. And even though I know we'd have to define what those neighborhoods are, but something like in the flats, on the terraces or whatever, and then call it there. And I think the strength in using by neighborhood is that we've been allowing these for a long time, and we seem to be almost at an equilibrium anyway. So this would sort of make that a little more solid. It would not create a moratorium, but it would say we really have a lot of homes already converted. Anyway, that was the thinking I've been getting based on our previous discussion.
From a legal perspective, let me just ask what that would do. You basically set a cap, which some cities have done, and I assume then that would also involve a kind of a waiting list for people to come in, much like the sidewalk vendors or like the cars.
The cars, okay. Except not the 2 for 1. It'd be a 1 for 1.
1 for 1. Right. Got it. Okay.
And to me, that we have, and the reason I like the idea of a 5% or whatever that percent would be, is just to kind of give us a little bit of fudge, because our numbers aren't going to be 100% accurate, and we acknowledge that. Anyway, it's not asking for a moratorium, it's asking for a change in the ordinance defining saturation, which is limiting.
That sounds better than the idea I came up with, so.
No.
I like that, but I'd go the other way. I don't know, 5% less. Anyway, I see that as working towards a good goal. I realize that we'll never have the perfect information to give us to be able to put this as a basis. So if you just look at the transient occupancy information that we were provided, it's 40% approximately, give or take, are dwelling units that are rented on a non-permanent basis, and 60% are permanent households. So if we say we're looking at 40% that is rental, then we're almost, halfway, half of the houses here. So, but
I think those are the things that I think would make a good findings on why, it'll be good for us to articulate why this is a good strategy. I also just remembered one other thing that was in my proposal that I forgot to mention, was excluding Hamilton Cove and Bahia Vista from that. So that would be my proposal. Whether or not it sticks is one issue, but clearly Hamilton Cove behaved this to me.
Okay, but the one thing is that I'm not in agreement with the idea of neighborhood as opposed to street. I am saying it should, I think, and I know it's an anomaly, but we are on every single issue that ever comes up. You can't apply what anybody else is doing. You have to look at us individually because we're so not like everybody else on so many levels. So I would rather see it be street by street, block by block, as opposed to a neighborhood.
So I just want to understand this because I'm going to have to, if there's, and what we would do is I was just going to say this. If there's a recommendation tonight from the Planning Commission, before we start drafting an ordinance on the saturation, we'd run it up the flagpole to the city council, because if the city council's not going to go for it, you don't want to spend all the city attorney's time drafting an ordinance that has no support. But with respect to if it is via street, does that mean that we take the current numbers on a street and say, let's say, Descanso has like 20 units, that for that street then, the max for that street is 20, and someone else on that street doesn't get it until one in that street drops off. I'm just trying to functionally understand how it would work.
Well,
I think that would, to me, that makes sense. I mean, whether we do it by neighborhood or street isn't the big concern for me. I was just thinking
Numbers.
it would be simpler at the neighborhood level.
I understand.
but
I'm just trying to get the
street-
mechanics.
And the mechanics, like, I kind of hear what you're saying, but there's also a movement on the city's part about looking at places that have conditional use permits and aren't using them. And so you snooze, you lose, is one of the ideas regarding that issue. So I think when we get to that part, considering that if people have use permits and they're not using them, then they lose them. And I don't know what the time frame would be, but it would seem to me that almost every street on the flats is almost at, if we were to set it around what it is citywide, that we're almost done. Okay.
And just so you know, for information, because Amanda and I worked on the letters that are going out to all the people that are not using their CUPs, both whether they are grandfathered in or whether they actually have a CUP. So those letters are ready to go out.
I have some comments
And
regarding.
it's asking for people to, if you haven't used it in a year,
I have comments regarding.
you're going to
that
lose
issue.
it, or you gotta, if
that's-
you've been bad, you gotta pay all the penalties
So
and the back
on
taxes.
administration, looking at this spreadsheet, how are these people, over 25 of them more, have over 31 days?
The list in front of you does not include those zero paying properties. Is that your question, Cindy? I'm sorry.
So all of these are renting them out and reporting some sort of tote.
Correct.
I would like to,
These are CIBR's numbers for their rentals.
So if
Right.
it's supposed to be less than 30, how are they getting 31 or even 28, 29? They're all just right
They're-
under it.
That's the total numbers, total.
I'm not
For
sure
each
I
unit.
understand the question. Commissioner Morris, are you asking me how are they renting it for less than 30 days? I don't think I understand the question.
When she's looking at the line that says days rented,
And if it's supposed to be less than 30 days, how are they all 31?
It's 30
days?
consecutive days by one person.
Right.
yeah, so it's, I guess.
So that,
So different people,
Yeah.
but the
Someone
whole
took
time,
that
so
one
they're
for
renting it
Right.
all the time. Every month they're
Correct.
renting it, but it's different.
Correct.
When you rent a property for a whole month, you're exempt from the tax, are you not? 30 days?
31,
If it's to the same
30
person,
days
yeah.
or less
Same
is
person.
transient rental.
The city does not get 12%.
Correct.
Correct.
And all of these people, they all have business license and they're all current on their taxes?
Correct.
And now you're sending out a letter to the ones that aren't even reporting
Right.
or haven't
We
been around?
We identified the ones that didn't have conditional use permits or didn't have business licenses, but we discovered them out there in the internet advertising rentals. It's our understanding that most of the rentals hosting companies, you can't post a review unless you actually booked that property. So if they have reviews, that's taken as evidence that they've had rentals.
Do you have an estimate on about?
There were probably.
I think it was 65.
Oh, that's a lot.
Well, no, I think the letters include people that in the past have had CUPs and have not reported any income.
We had about 8 that were completely off the book, nothing.
No CUP in.
Nothing. Then we had a few where they had a business license, but we couldn't find record of CUPs, but they had paid some TOT. Then we had some different mixtures of some way they were non-compliant. So those letters have gone out.
That's great.
The last group are the ones that have been reporting, and they're legal, but they've been reporting 0.
But they can report 0, but 1 month a year they have to pay, right?
1 day a year.
1 day a year. Okay.
Correct. And they have all gone more than 12 months without any
So if
payments.
it's 0 for
Can't
12
get
months, the
those.
letters say you're
Right.
done, we're subject to, we're asking you to voluntarily give it up, sign a form, or 2, admit that you've not properly reported and pay the back taxes plus the penalties, or 3, if you're going to fight it, if you know whatever, then it comes to you to revoke it. If they're not going to voluntarily give it up and they're not going to pay back taxes, then and they say no, then we're going to have a series of revocation hearings.
I would see the number 2 is probably not going to be brought up at all, because then it's tax fraud.
Could you clarify something,
And I'm just saying.
Amanda?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify the sign in the windows? So I heard before you saying that if they're not renting it, they don't have to have their sign. And I'm wondering if that's showing the conflict, you know, with her seeing that there's some people that aren't, well, she's saying there's people that were renting, but there's no sign.
They're supposed to have a sign posted.
At all, anybody who has a CUP?
The code is not as explicit in saying that the sign has to be there all the time, whether it is occupied by a transient guest or not. The intent of the sign is so that neighbors know who's managing the property.
Yeah. I would
And then
suggest
when
you
there's
have
transient
that.
guests
Anyone who
there.
has a CUP should have a sign. It's
Right.
misleading and it's confusing, and all of a sudden someone's there and they're like, they just forgot to put the sign
Right.
up.
Right.
That's an issue.
And I think we have
Should be
had
mandatory.
reports that when the owners are there, we've had owners want to take the sign down because they don't want people knocking on the door and asking about the rental. So I agree with you, Commissioner Morris, it needs to be consistently, the language needs to be clear
And
and,
everybody else would have to have a business license or a license and show
Right.
it.
And,
right?
and one of the, just a preview of coming attractions, because you don't have enough to do. But the conditions of approval for CUPs are, we're gonna have that as a separate agenda item. And that's where we can address the signage issue, because it's currently in there
Okay,
and we
good.
can.
Because that would help solve the problem with the neighbors, that when they have problems, that's the problem, is they can't find anyone. Well, sometimes there's no sign, so if we got the sign
I
that
agree.
had to be there, that would at least help.
I agree.
So I would like to add something. I did.
Like these Airbnbs and stuff like that, that there's no one around. Is it legal for a city to say we don't want them in our city anymore? 'Cause my point is, when you have a management company managing your property, there's someone directly to go to. You know who CIVR's properties are, you know who my properties are. If Ed's doing it.
But
Isn't that
It's not a transient occupancy valid under the city unless there is someone full-time in the city
Right.
ready to handle it.
And you have to leave a
That's what the
number
requirement.
and-
Mr.
All right, so
Glass,
you-
can
it
you-
cannot be an Airbnb without someone in
Physically.
the city ready to jump
Run
on
down,
bad
yeah.
things.
I guess my point is, there are many of those around the city, and the contact is the maid. The maid's not.
Yeah,
gonna
that
come
happens a lot.
Wake us up in an argument at 2:00 in the morning, like the management company would show up and go,
Right.
hey, I got a problem, I don't wanna have to deal with the city on this, I'm gonna go down there.
Commissioner Glass, please use your microphone.
And
Just sit a little closer.
And again, that is an instance where if the person listed, well, they have to be a responsible person. That's part of the
So they
CUP
don't show up,
process.
can be reported.
They don't show up,
Right.
that can be revoked. And again, one of the things we're doing is, if we make these non-running with the land, the person that owns the CUP has to come up to the commission and identify specifically who that person is. Now, when the property passes ownership, then second owner, you don't know who they're going to use. And so we're going to have that's one of the things that's changing.
Be able to better monitor that.
Amanda, how have these numbers increased over the years?
They haven't very much. We have probably had around 300 active properties for the last 10 years. It kind of goes.
So then this brings me back to, why would we say we're saturated and that's it? If we're really staying at the same number all the time for 10 years, you're saying?
I would say we're down this year.
Well, and
We're definitely down this year, but I'm just saying, if that's what we're saying, it has not gone up.
Yeah,
That's
a good question.
What are we talking about here? I mean, we're spinning our wheels.
Well, I think the reason is we don't have a definition for saturation, one.
We are
So this provides it. The other is, real or perceived, there's the feeling that we're getting more and more of these. And if we're not, then this doesn't do anything. If we are, it does. So I think it eliminates the argument, and that
The
we
only
are.
thing I
that
look at
more-
is-
So I think, I mean, it's, to me, it's the same thing as a speed limit really has to reflect what people actually drive on the road. It doesn't mean just because you have a curvy road and the speed limit's 30, you don't really need a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. You know what I mean? It's the way I look at it, planning sometimes is an expression of what it is to have good manners in a community for newcomers. And that's kind of...
See, my only problem with it is, I live here, I just got one. You've lived here, you may have had one for 25 years. Someone moves here, and now you don't have the same rights as anyone else.
Well, however, you can buy one with that. There will still be some.
The old
ones. Plus, if one disappears, you can go and apply.
And you'd make a running list of,
Right.
of like, who applied first would be on Clarissa.
Yeah, and then if you did it by
That person would be
street-
the first public hearing, is that kind of what you're talking about?
You mean you can buy one with the land?
Right,
Is
I
that
mean,
what
if you
you're
bought
saying?
one that already existed and
Okay.
it wasn't, and it's under the
But that's-
existing permit stuff, then you would maintain.
That's changing.
Well, I still would
Well,
like
it's
to.
changing except for
No,
the ones
the ones that
already
are
exist.
existing.
The new one,
that would be
okay,
for
all
you.
right, so.
But anyway, I understand what you're saying, but I think this is a way of both defining saturation and.
Okay. Commissioner Putnam?
All I want to say, I think that I keep thinking that the thing we need to do, a couple of things, is have those hearings. It's written. It isn't like this is a new idea, we're gonna send letters and ask. That's written. That's in what everybody's supposed to have. Sure, if you've got a grandfathered one, you're not gonna have that letter around, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. And if we could eliminate, and I think you could probably eliminate 50. If you could eliminate 50, and we come up with a new plan, we make it a permit, we don't do a CUP, or every time we give a CUP, I'd like to see us make it more restrictive. I mean, okay, across the street from me, the Staff family, they have a 12-week-a-year CUP. Any 12 weeks, doesn't have to be consecutive, but that was a condition put on them when they got that CUP. Bert Scott was just in here a couple months ago. He said, I only want to do it in the summer because we want to live there in the winter. I have one, and I only do it for about 2.5 months because I have a steady 9 or 10 month tenant. And I do it in the summer to make enough money to do deferred maintenance, basically. And so, but if we can eliminate them, then we could put another permit plan in, so it's not running with the land. Or put a condition, there again, we could keep CUP, we can't go backward, but we could make the condition that somebody has to come in. Right now, they're supposed to get inspected every 3 years, and we don't do any inspections.
I just got an inspection.
Okay, let me just.
That was a pre-inspection.
If I could just talk about the process. The reason we're sending out the letters and asking people who have not been using them for a year to voluntarily give them up is because We have to do a public notice. We have to send out notices to everyone within a certain distance. That's very costly. You have to have an attorney besides me come and represent you, because I'll be out there as a prosecutor, or he will, because you can't have the law firm on both sides. And so it's very expensive to do that. And so we thought we'd ask people to give them up before we started this public process.
The revocation.
It's also, I agree that the numbers that the city sees have not changed much, but I do believe, as Bart said, that there are certain entities like Airbnb, it's not done the same as it is with CIVR, so we have no means to check that. And so we perceive there's more because there is. I mean, we can't prove it, we don't have the data, we don't have the research, but that's happening. So that's why, I mean, I think it's correct what Commissioner Hewitt is saying, that we have to make a saturation adjustment despite what we all feel is like we need to have that income. And we should have as many as possible because the city makes more money, or we own the house and we should be able to do what we want with it. There is a perception, and it is without doubt, that the housing here for full-time residents is not working. I mean, there's just not enough, and it's becoming so costly we can't. So, in reverse, most of the real high rent stuff is on the terraces. So when we say, oh, we're going to take away housing on the terraces for a vacation rental, it's kind of like, it doesn't work for me, because that isn't really helping the common man here, the people that work, because those are all out of their budget. So I just think moving towards some sort of cap, as Commissioner Hewitt suggested, is a good thing. And if it's by percentage, and I like by block, he likes by neighborhood, or maybe that's a discussion, I think it's worth doing.
Two things. If we go towards the idea of neighborhood, we would have to come up with a definition of what a neighborhood is. Secondly, we invited Mrs. Wright to stay and participate, so I don't know when would be the proper moment to allow her to.
But let me say, can I say something about what the neighborhood, I see neighborhood, as she said, she's on Descanso, you've got Clarissa. And so if you just say what's on Descanso, you're probably more bothered by the neighbors closer to your bedroom who are on Clarissa. So if you just say up and down Descanso, is not as good as somebody being really the circle around, the ones that you're really going to be, and that could be coming from Catalina too, if you.
Sure, the
But
flats.
we can't look, I mean, we can't change what's already happened. So if it's a conditional use permit and it's a land use entitlement, then,
I'm talking how you define it. I think we should do neighborhood and not just say.
Yeah,
a street.
and let me give you, can I give you an example of that? First of all, Eric, you're spot on. It's like I said when I got up and spoke.
That's a first.
But he is. But he is, because when I got up and spoke, earlier, and I mentioned that you've got a 20-year waiting list for a car on this island, because we have too many cars on this island. It's no different than vacation rentals. And so in order to get a car, someone has to pass away. They have to move off of the island. Why isn't it any different for vacation rentals? And so when he spoke, he spoke right to me, because I feel exactly the way, living in this situation, I feel the way that he spoke. And I'm going to get back to what you said, Sandra. On the flats, and you spoke to it too. It's what you call saturation. And I'll give you a really good example. We live at 210 Descanso. And anyone who knows where that is, we're about 4 houses from the boathouse. So we've got, which are they're not marked on here as vacation rentals, and they are. So we've got them 2 across the street here. We actually got 3. We got 3, and then we've got 3 behind us that their fence, which is the building is right there at the fence, given maybe 3 feet, and our bedroom is 3 feet on the other side. So what do you consider saturation? Because when we fought the CUP a year ago, 2 houses down, and this is another thing. I'm sorry, I don't want to get off track, but while I'm thinking of it, grandfather. You shouldn't be able to grandfather. Just because a family member had one and the family member passes, that doesn't automatically entitle you to a CUP. In my opinion, they shouldn't be grandfathered. The woman that we fought on the CUP last time I was here, like 8 or 9 months ago, her attitude was, well, she didn't get it, and her attitude was that, well, she's just going to come in and reapply in a year. And I'm like, well, good luck with that, because we're still oversaturated right where our particular house is. So again, it comes back to, what do you consider oversaturated? Because the city looks at it, because I've done my research, the city looks at it, it's got to be the house on either side of us and the 2 houses in front of us.
Or behind you.
Not behind. And that's why I did my homework and I took my own map, and if you recall, because a lot of you were here, I took a highlighter on every single rental that is actually being rented out, whether they're legal or they're not, actually being rented out. And it was someone on the Planning Commission, I don't think he's on the Planning Commission anymore, was shocked, number one, to see how many people signed the petition, and number 2, how many highlighted areas there were on that map. So again, to your point, it's what you consider oversaturation, I think, is more important or just as important as the number. And it seems to me that if you're going to cap it, which would be my suggestion, because you do have the VRBOs involved. And so I believe we're more saturated than you even know we are. And I think that a cap is, at least at this point in time, till you can look into it further, a cap is more appropriate. And then just like with a car, when one falls off, then you can apply. You know, it's really unfair. And unless you live in the flats, and I don't know how many of you live in the flats, but unless you really live in the flats, particularly the lower part of the flats, you really cannot possibly understand how impossible it is. And so many people want to move out of the flats, and that's not the way that it should be, especially when you've had a house for 50 years. And particularly in our section of the flats, those are all original owners. People are putting cones out because they can't park. When I have to fight for 8 months, the city, to get a handicap spot for my husband, and I have to get an attorney to get it because they don't want to take away a parking spot, to give him something that 3 doctors want him to have, we have a problem in the city. And my suggestion is also to, in 2020, consider not giving out more Hamilton Cove permits until one drops off in Hamilton Cove, because it still adds to the parking problem in the flats. And I think that even though you're the Planning Commission, I think you have a responsibility to this city and to consider that when you're considering your CUPs, because it's just unlivable in the flats.
So I have a question for you regarding your map.
Yeah.
Okay. So have you been to Amanda's office and gone, because can we verify those addresses? Because I'm sure if we go down, do some investigating, look at them, because if in fact those are illegal rentals, then what do we do about that? I mean, because we have to do something. In fact, then they would be taken off because they're not CUPs. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're doing them illegally. Yeah. And this is another thing that I think is going to be a problem. I just don't want it to backfire us. If you're saying her map is incorrect, and you see all these people go in and out, and if they're doing it under the radar, that is not going to change until we can get a grip on that. You know what I'm saying? So we're going off the map here. You're telling us something different, which I believe you. Yeah. I'm not saying that it can't be happening. Yeah. I've walked down Descanso Street. I've seen the vehicles, but I'm just saying, maybe you could make an appointment with the planning department, and you can go through addresses and say, this is what I see, this is what I see, this is what I see. Yeah. VBROs are done. They're legal as long as they have the permit, the business license, everything. They're not legal unless they're doing it without paying taxes, and it wasn't approved. Right. And I'm sure it's happening everywhere in the country, and so that's another thing that I'm concerned about too, is when we put a stop, is now everybody going to go under underground, and how are we gonna be able to
Yeah,
be
it's a
able to,
problem.
it's a catch-22, but if,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm concerned about the map that you said with all those highlighting, but please, and if you do have issues, you say you call the cops, you call the
I
vacation.
call the sheriffs. That's all.
Okay,
I don't bother with
but
the
do you
residents.
come up
The
and
sheriffs.
file a,
Yes.
okay, so then we
Yeah.
need to act on that, you
Yeah.
know, certain amount of things, and
Yeah.
then they can get them revoked.
Yeah.
That's the process that we're here for.
So what,
And it's, you know, there's other things involved too. For example, I went and talked to the owner behind us that has the big white house. And it's an ongoing problem for us. And I've had conversations with her about it. And my conversation with her today is, I am tired of picking up cigarette butts and all the beer bottles that are thrown behind over the fence on our property. I said, I'm done with it. You need to wrangle that in. I don't know what you're going to do about it, but you need to do something about it because I'm not dealing with it anymore. There's so many different elements that go into these when bad renters come in. You know,
Is that something that is
when,
on,
in response to one of Debbie's complaints, we got in touch with the owners at the big White House. And it's my understanding the back of the house has a deck on it.
No. It's the front of the house on the street does. The back, for whatever reason, I'm always having to get out of bed and walk around the back and say, hey, do you guys mind taking around to the front? You've got that big patio out on the front. Why do you feel it necessary to hang outside the back door and create all this noise? It's like party back behind the kitchen, right up against the fence when they've got that big. And those are vacation rentals all around there too. So it's not like they're just going to be bothering other vacation rentals, not actual residents. But it's an ongoing problem, and unless you live around it, you can't possibly understand. It's like I had a conversation with someone on the beach today, and she said to me, I don't understand what the problem is. I said, you don't understand what the problem is because you live here 6 weeks out of the year. You come to your house. The rest of the time it sits empty. Would you want to live next to this where you actually live?
Debbie, may I ask you a question about why do you see it as a neighborhood and not per street? I want to know what your logic is there. You've really done your
It's
homework
like
here.
I said, I believe it was San Antonio, I can't remember which city it was, that I mentioned that they have just recently passed where you can only have 1 per 8 houses per block. That's all, they have, there is a movement in this country right now, and it is against rentals, and you all know that. I'm sure you all know that. And the reason why it's against rentals is because it's gotten so out of hand that people in these towns, and these are tourist towns I mentioned to you, they live and breathe the tourist industry just like we do. But they're saying enough is enough. Because at what point do you say, we have to get a handle on this, we have to get a grip on this?
Debbie?
Because it's gotten out of control for us.
We're in the same wheelhouse, okay? So I just wanted to say to you that even with what we have, flawed as it may be, there is not one street in the flats, on any of the streets, that has more than 40% of year-round housing. Most of the, Eucalyptus is 70%, 76% vacation rental or non-occupied.
Yeah.
So that leaves 24% for year-round housing.
Yeah.
That's the worst. The best is at 43%, that's your world.
Yeah.
And that's 56% year-round housing. So all of them have reached, if just say we pick that arbitrary 60-40.
Yeah.
So for me, I have been making, because I do think it affects the quality of life, the parking, that's going to be, I know what the issues are there. It's really hard.
But it also affects the businesses, because if you have employees that can't find housing, who do you employ?
It's absolutely.
You know, so it doesn't just affect the people who are living around all those rentals. It affects the business owners too, because and I'll give an example, and it's not. I'm not placing any blame anywhere. I'm just using it as an example. When someone works at an island company and their husband dies recently, good example. Husband dies in Triana, and they have to move out of that island company housing. What does that wife and those kids do? Where do they move in the middle of the summer? She's still got to work. She's now got a one-income family. So it doesn't just affect the residents, it affects the business also. That's all, So it's really all-encompassing.
It is, but the bottom line thing is, like you said, things shouldn't be grandfathered, but the ones that are in that are already legally grandfathered, that's why I think the policing thing, and the noise, but to really get rid of this so we can put it on to something. I vote yes on CUPs a lot because I know they've met the existing conditions that basically require us to. There's ones I don't want to vote yes on, but they've satisfied the existing conditions. That's why I would like to see us. But CUP does mean conditional use of that property, so it rides with the property.
Yeah.
But if we could get rid of the ones that at least we'd have, not a clean slate, but we've got to start someplace. And if we could have people get rid of the ones they aren't using and this and that, and in the future, I mean, tonight wouldn't be soon enough, but, to put some sort of condition that there has to be some sort of renewal.
Well, I think you're on the
because
right
you could, this
track.
is, but see, we go way back in Avalon for having summer rentals. Some of these other places haven't been a resort as long, or they haven't had such a problem.
Yeah.
We've always had a huge problem because there's no down the road.
Yeah.
There's no suburb, there's no other little town. You're either here or you're not here, so that's the other thing, like the partying and all of that. Yeah, that's awful.
And I'm not
but-
against CUPs. I don't want you to
No,
get
you
that.
should be, though. No, you should be, because we should
have.
have a different system.
But I'm really not, and I want to make that really clear. I'm not against CUPs. What the problem I have is when it's not done properly or there's issues. I can deal with my issues. I just pick up the phone and call the sheriffs. When we fought that rental 8 months ago or whenever it was, the manager of CIVR came in here, and of course she's representing CIVR as she should. But when the comment is made that, well, because this person lives a couple doors down from us, when the comment is made, well, I just sleep with earplugs. Well, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have to sleep with earplugs. You know what I'm saying? Wait a minute. I just want to make one other point. And for me, I think just this conversation alone tells me that you're on the right track. That the discussion is happening, and that to me is a big step forward. And I just, so again, it's moratorium. When one drops off, just like the car, one drops off, then another one can apply. And you look at the map before. It's not a matter of how many CUPs you have. It's a matter of where are they located. And so when you say that we're oversaturated because here, and here, and here, but you don't take into effect all the houses that are right up against our bedrooms, well, I'm sorry, that's oversaturated. It's mind-boggling to me, how it's looked at.
One of the things, as Scott mentioned, is that we're moving towards creating a resolution to take the rentals away from being a land use entitlement and making them be an administrative permit, and then trying to craft what that would look like as well.
Yeah.
So the thing I felt that has happened a lot is that we don't have the mechanisms in place, and that's also up for discussion tonight, about inspecting, accountability, and if it is an administrative permit and it can be renewed by year or whatever we decide, we're not there yet, is to say, how many have you had complaints? When was the last time you had an inspection? What, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's because it's really important that we have these rentals here.
Yeah.
But it also, we've sort of lost a grip on them. And so I agree with you, but you're right. We're trying, and it's really difficult.
Well, you have to start somewhere, and this is a really good start tonight, I feel.
And please, I'm anxious to find out too about Descanso.
Oh, I can show you exactly where they are.
And make an appointment at planning, because I feel your pain. I'm not ignorant to the fact that we have no housing and that the quality of housing, and that is why we're here discussing it, because like Sandy said, when everything is satisfied, you know, unless it's a bias because we just don't want them, we can't just be saying no, 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 because we don't want them, because it's not, it's the quality of life, because in fact, they're you know, they're coming up with a satisfied application. So that's why we need to figure out a different, this is why we're here doing this.
Yeah.
Well,
And
one
so
problem in the flats is that you cannot write a petition, you can't go get the neighbors, you can't write letters when there are no neighbors left.
That's so true.
And that
We're
is,
dealing with that with the parking right now as we speak.
yeah, the neighbors are.
Well, you're getting the overflow parking from workers
Oh.
everywhere.
People going
It's not.
over town for 5
I mean,
days
it's mostly residents.
Yeah.
That you're getting the parking on your
Yeah,
street.
people who don't want to walk 4
Right.
blocks to go to work, you know, I mean, don't even get me started, you know.
Can I ask a clarification from Commissioner Hewart, which is going to complicate everything on this system? I just need direction. Okay. So if you envision it, let's say we cap it at, I'll pick an arbitrary 400. So 400, 5 go off and we have a waiting list. Now the question is, how do you envision this? Is if you're next on the waiting list, do you have a public hearing for it where you can be denied? Or once you're on the waiting list, it's
automatic?
it is automatic.
No.
So explain, I just want to make certain, because,
Yeah, this is how I see it,
okay,
though.
regardless, you still have to have a public hearing. I just want to make certain.
Yeah.
Okay.
That within either a block or neighborhood, when one is vacated and you have 3 people on the list, you call the first one and say, if you want, you have to apply for a permit or business license or whatever the mechanism is to allow that within 30 days, or we're going to give it to the second person.
But they,
Yeah,
no,
except they
but
have
I'm
to be-
saying,
But
I'm
you
saying.
have to go through the
You
same
have to do a public
process.
hearing.
You still could be denied.
You still
for-
could be denied, and then what
then
you're
it
going to
would be
have to
open.
think of is, again, I'm trying to make certain this is clear as
Yeah.
possible at the beginning, rather than we go down the rabbit hole. So if you're denied, then you have a chance to appeal it to the
Powers that be.
City Council. Now, if the City Council grants it, fine. If they deny it, then the question is, if you've been denied, do you go back on the list at the bottom, at the end of the list, or do you, I just need.
Yeah, I would think you were thrown off.
Just something,
Yeah,
something
it would
to
be
think
some-
about.
Yeah.
Well, there's one other thing.
And then the
too.
next person goes on the list.
But
I
you know, it's
understand.
not-
I'm just
but-
trying to.
Sounds kind of complicated.
But
a little
it-
bit.
How about a
I think
lottery?
you're making it more
It's
complicated than it needs
not,
to be.
it's
I don't
not
think it's
that-
complicated at all.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty
I'm just,
straightforward.
The person on the
pardon.
list is next door.
Yeah,
And there's your saturation's blown out.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
No,
once you
that's what
set
I-
your
think of a public
saturation,
hearing.
I think once we
No, I don't
count-
think so, no.
decide what our saturation criteria is going to be, I would think that when your name comes off the list, you still have to go through the.
Yes.
You still have to satisfy the
saturation.
the saturation and
exactly.
whatever else. And
Yeah.
so if at the time your name comes up, wherever you are is now oversaturated, then you won't be able to.
Right. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Understand. Then again, I've gone through this before with firework permits. It was a disaster.
Yeah.
And so if you fall off the list because you're saturated, then what I would have a problem advising you as your council is that if you go automatically off the list and then 3 years later that neighborhood is not saturated,
And you're
then
on the bottom of the
and you're
list.
bottom of the list, that's not fair.
Yeah, that's not fair at all.
So it's in theory, it's great. We can work out the nuts and bolts of it if that's the direction and the council and city council agrees. But there is a way to do it. We just have to think about how people come off the waiting list.
Well, here's a question. though, on that.
That's
What if
difficult.
you're denied not because of saturation? Because in theory, we've defined saturation so you can apply so that you are by definition not oversaturated.
Right.
Because you were able to apply, because we have that one off, one on. So you would only be denied for some other cause.
Right.
So then, to me, I don't see, I mean, I see what you're saying.
That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, and
You
to
could
get
do
back
that.
to
But
your-
that's, to me, the power of defining saturation.
And
to get
defining
back to
what the
your
other
discussion-
causes are.
Right. And I think we have a pretty well, we'll see how good the other causes are once this is defined.
Okay. To get back to your question though, which I don't think really got answered, I think you have to have a public hearing, because I think you have to have, you still have to have the homeowner.
We are,
Yeah.
even though we're moving this to non-running with the land,
Yeah.
the direction has been, we're still going to have a public hearing for each and every one. Because the neighbors need to have the right to know and to talk about it and the impact on them. So we are preserving that.
Yeah. So, I think I've said everything I need to see. Let me look at my notes real quick. Again, I'd like you to consider in 2020, perhaps putting Hamilton Cove, having them, when one leaves. Hamilton Cove, it's its own separate, it's got problems because it's got to have a golf cart and it's got to come into town, and we get all of that. But the problem that you have is if you enact something perhaps in 2020 that says another person in Hamilton Cove can't apply until another one drops off, because you are adding to the parking issues in the flats. You know, just like when the summer renters, the people come and use their houses in the summertime that don't affect us in the wintertime, although it doesn't matter, you can't park even in the wintertime. But do you see what I'm saying? So everything adds to our parking situation in the flat. So I think you have to look at Hamilton Cove a little differently, and maybe that's not fair, but it still impacts the parking. So if you increase how many rentals you have at Hamilton Cove, instead of having it be like the car, one drops off, one has another one has the opportunity to get on. If you can, and I don't know what the solution is for that, to be honest with you, but if you can somehow keep in the back of your mind when you're coming up with your solutions for all these different things you have to deal with, keep that in mind. It impacts the flats. Everything impacts the flats.
And just let me just put a caveat on that. I need to look at the Hamilton Cove Development Code, because part of that.
Was that short-term renting?
No, I'm sorry, it was not, it's the development agreement. Part of that agreement was because they knew that they would be bringing vehicles into town, they were required to add additional parking spaces.
Yeah.
And
Under
that
the
may,
current
that may,
development
that,
agreement.
yeah,
The
under
current
yeah,
one.
and so that may impact our ability to say,
Yeah,
you know,
that makes
because
sense.
if the
other
if
thing
the
is
environmental
that-
impact was already considered.
If you go out to Hamilton Cove, the only time you're going to find the majority of our carts out of our development is 4th of July. That's the only time you're going to find them out. I live there, I've lived there for 30 years. I'm talking about the majority of our
Okay.
carts. I'm talking
'Cause I
about
see the
more than
stickers on the carts.
50%. I've lived
Yeah.
there for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'd take you up there right now, and it's going to be full of golf carts.
I would
And it's
like to
the
see a
busiest
shuttle
time of
coming
year.
from Hamilton Cove
Yeah,
into
that would be
town.
good.
Yeah, that's actually a great
Regularly run
idea.
shuttle, and
Yeah.
then
That was in the original agreement.
if we wanted to, you could grant a permit without use of a vehicle because they have a way into town.
But that
If that's
Yeah.
doesn't, but that doesn't keep them from registering the vehicle, that doesn't keep the owner from owning a vehicle and bringing
No.
it to town. I think
So
part
I guess
of,
my
part
question
of our,
would be too, what if people live there full-time?
they
Well, then
have the
they-
right to be,
That's-
but I
How is it
think,
different? It's still the same amount of traffic
But
down in
I-
front of your house. How is that different?
Because there's so many people that don't live there full-time that rent out their units. It's a huge, I mean, I know a lot of people who rent out their units.
I do too.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is the environmental impact for that report considered that they'd be fully occupied all the time, and that there were requirements to build parking in the downtown. And so to include additional requirements, yes, they have, yeah. I remember
Where do they build parking in town?
they had to do a whole bunch of restripes.
let's clarify, there's been two Hamilton Cove developments. The original development was the one that went from carpooling to non-carpooling. The current Hamilton Cove development that Scott's speaking of has an agreement to build another 88 units, and they are required to participate in creating parking. So they paid for the restriping on Metropole. That was one of the steps they've taken. Then, after they build so many units, we have to see how many.
Right.
They're going to, the proposal was to create additional parking along Casino Way. So there would be additional golf cart parking there.
Like
The
there's
only
room.
opportunity there
But
was.
we can't change that, because that's what the council did
Right. But I
20,
think,
30 years ago.
I mean, that's dangerous.
The council did that 20, 30 years ago. I'm sorry.
so, but I think to the extent that the point that let's say we have 2,100 dwelling units in Avalon, that means we could have 2,100
Golf carts.
autoettes on the streets. So to the extent that we try to create solutions in a transportation plan to mitigate the parking downtown where people don't want to drive a block to work, or figure out how can we provide parking for people that are going to the boat so that they're not all scattered all up in the flats, and try to mitigate those parking issues. I don't necessarily agree that restricting an autoet from a dwelling unit is going to solve that parking problem. It is a problem, and I know it is. So I think to the extent that the city is going to be working on some transportation plans and parking plans, and I think we have a parking traffic committee here, that maybe we can come up with some better solutions.
I think it's a whole different topic, because amongst us, we have many different ideas about the issues regarding parking.
Yeah.
I'm saying to myself, my dream would be to see Clarissa to Beacon to Metropole be you can only have a cart down there if you live there. I mean, that would be my dream in the city, to see the congestion. I also have the other thing that hasn't been said right here, right now, is also regarding rental carts, which are really cause the most. He's making noises at me. Can you hear me? Okay. Are making rental noise. That's really what's the noise, the pollution, the confusion, everything that really exacerbates what's happens in our town too. So we haven't discussed that, and yes, it is a huge issue that Avalon faces. So I sympathize with you.
I mean, 25 years I have watched what has happened to Descanso. It didn't used to be like that. You used to be able to park where you live. And I know it's a separate issue. I'm sorry to get off topic, but it's an issue of people being lazy. Take $1 or $3 taxi, for Christ's sake, if you're going to be gone for 5 days. I actually had a guy say to me on the boat, because we have a petition that 30 homeowners on Lower Descanso, just sign as being submitted to the city. Because we are ready. We're done. We're ready to fight the city on this parking on Descanso. When you have 1 hour parking on both sides of the street, as Clarissa, I mean, let's face it, people aren't going to park there to go to Vaughn's, but you take 1 hour parking on both sides of the street, but you give resident stickers to over there, but you don't to us. So we've got a whole proposal we're getting ready to put towards for the city. But again, but your decisions on what you do on these CUPs, you have to take parking into consideration. You can't. You're not being responsible if you don't.
May I suggest that we have other people, and not to say that you haven't spoken and you still can speak, but we have some other people. I don't know if they want to speak on this as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. Can you state your name, please?
Julie Glass,
Thank you.
and I actually live at Hamilton Cove and work on Clarissa. And the parking is a nightmare. But you've got people, I don't think it's just a matter of CUPs, I think it's a matter of people, I hate to say this, being lazy. I mean, you've got people that literally live on Clarissa, live on Descanso, and drive the cart to Vaughn's, you can walk 1 block. You can walk 2 blocks. So taking away golf carts from homes, especially if you live, whether it's, down up by Triana or anywhere a mile outside of town, Hamilton Cove specifically, anywhere, it's asinine to punish them when you've got people in town that are also causing quite the issue. So maybe as a community, if you live in town, if you're on Clarissa, if you're on Descanso, and you're not grabbing a ton of stuff, if you want to go get a coffee, walk. It's beautiful. We live in a town that's absolutely beautiful and safe. So I think penalizing neighbors is not a great way of doing it, but maybe as a community coming together and not everybody using their carts and parking their town, walk might be a better way of approaching it.
I completely agree with that.
Maybe Hamilton Cove could buy us a parking lot.
I think they've bought a lot already. They've bought fire trucks.
To give you an idea, and many of you don't know, what Hamilton Cove did to build in this town, We
know.
built, you know, we bought the town the hook and ladder fire truck. You know, we built the public
This was
campground.
pre-developer fees,
You know,
right?
you know, we put in the desal plan originally. You know, we built Tremont here.
Well, yeah.
What do you mean, well, yeah, well,
Well,
yeah.
it became.
But Janet,
No, we,
Janny has a point.
my
I mean,
point is,
so for me, I
Hamilton
keep
Cove
seeing.
has done a lot for the town.
No, it has, but
A
it was
lot.
also pre-developers fees. There still are no developers fees. So anybody that develops here at this current time doesn't pay a dime towards infrastructure or anything else.
That's not
So
correct.
well.
That's not correct.
But,
That's not
but we don't really have what most towns have that contribute to the well-being and how it impacts the town. We don't really have that.
I understand. You have any development comes through this town requires a development agreement, and the development agreement can set the fees. Without your development fees, the council's moving in. You know, we're having. I think we've almost got the development fees ready to go, and there is the ability to impose significantly more development fees than have been in the past, but again, that was the decision of council 20, 30 years ago. I mean, they had the right to require
And one thing about
all
that,
the infrastructure they did.
There's a major problem in our whole country with housing. And I think what a lot of people look past is because we're always looking for ways for cities to pick up more money and give everyone a new park and everything else. Part of the reason that there's such a shortage in housing is the amount of regulation government puts on new building. It's proven, it's studied, and the more regulation you put, and especially in the state of California where we're really hit hard, we have the most regulation on building. And that sometimes got to be looked at too, because if a builder, if everything's rented in the neighborhood, now here it's a different story because we don't have land.
Yeah, we don't.
If you have land, but normally in a lot of California, there's still a lot of land and there's still a lot of homelessness. But the reason is when you run out of housing units, normally developers would come right in and say, I see an opportunity.
Right.
I'm going to start building units. But you have to go through cities, and cities keep handing you more and more, and pretty soon it doesn't make any sense to do it. So there's got to be a balance somewhere in between where we don't just regulate things out of existence.
I agree, but
why I think we should-
that's off topic.
Commissioners?
However, I would have to say it all depends on who you talk to and what city you're in, so.
So, commissioners, these are all excellent points and excellent things we need to deal with.
Correct.
But let's bring it back to the saturation discussion.
So there's a proposal.
There's a proposal from Commissioner Hewitt.
You remember that? It was about an hour ago?
And
Hour and a half ago.
I agree with, I mean, I don't know, from my point of view, I really like what he said, if I understand everything correctly. My only difference would be between neighborhood versus
Right.
street.
Yeah,
That's it.
and I kind of like them both, so I'm trying to think of how to administer it.
Well, what
One
we-
would be
what-
easier.
So could,
I think neighborhood.
If there is a movement by the commission, in other words, if there's 4 votes to go forward with this, we can do one of 2 things. One, we can run the concept by the city council first, or we could confer as staff and look at the various neighborhoods and zones and come up with a proposal if you give us some guidance, whether it's going to be blocks or neighborhoods, and do that before we go to the council.
I think we
'Cause
should do that
have a more
before,
concrete idea.
and maybe you can give us an idea on, could you come up with something that, like,
Well,
both
one-
of them to see what would maybe make more sense? I mean, how you would do a neighborhood versus a street, you know what I mean? Like
think,
how,
so, for
Well, how do you
my
do streets pretty
edification, what if you go across the table and you tell me what your definition is of a neighborhood? Is it the people within 4 blocks of you? Is it within people within 5 houses of you?
Or is it a zone,
Or is it
which is how other cities
No,
have done
is
it?
it a
Some have done it.
subdivision
I
or?
wouldn't do a zone because our zoning is kind of wrong.
I have to check the box.
Right, I
people.
would definitely not do it by zone.
But it may be
But
an area.
I think
You
it's
know,
an
Definitely
area.
where
Definitely an
if you're
area.
the first house in the 300 block of Clarissa, then what you think of as your immediate neighborhood may not just be the 300
And
block of
That's
Clarissa.
the reason I kind of like the idea of streets, is it's pretty simple, straightforward,
It could just be
and it's almost
these
like.
20
Sometimes
houses.
simpler is better.
Yeah, and in a way, I'm leaning towards that, just so we don't get lost in the debate over what a neighborhood is.
Well,
So-
then you have Whitley or Maiden Lane, you know. I got 5 houses on my neighborhood, and Whitley and Metropole are the longest streets. They've got tons of things, especially Whitley.
Yeah.
But, so if we kept it at 40, 45, the bumper or something on Main, I mean, then you're there.
Yeah, I'm there.
Done.
Yeah, I am done, and I have every house except me on Maiden Lane, and the one.
Yeah,
on
and I guess
Let's
the reason
address.
The reason I said neighborhood is I didn't want to do zone.
I understand.
So doing by the street also takes care of that issue. So it might make more sense to start this.
So Amanda had suggested
Progress.
polling the commission.
Yeah.
If you want, I mean,
But
that's
I'm
just,
thinking
Let's,
it's
wait a
not
minute,
even
hang-
worth it.
let's do,
Yeah, I
let-
don't think it's,
let's take baby steps. Let's poll the commission. The concept of putting an overall cap, because that's the very thing. If 4 of you don't want to do that, there's no point in even talking about streets versus neighborhood. So the concept is, basically, we can work on the details later, but is there a support for putting some kind of cap tied to the existing number of CUPs first, and then it's one off, one on. So I think we should go
So
through.
you're saying citywide cap as opposed to designating.
Well, no. Even the concept of a cap.
Like a cap.
Even a concept of a cap, because if you don't want to pursue the concept of a cap and you want to go somewhere else,
just I did.
like no more period, no matter what, and if they come up, they just die. That's the thing. Just the concept of a cap, whether it's neighborhood, street, citywide. We just want to establish, do we want to do that, and then we can get to the granular details. Yes, exactly. So let's just.
I would say street.
But do you show of hands for that, or how do you want to?
You can just show of hands.
I think the question is,
But just the
Okay.
concept of a
The
cap.
concept of a cap.
Street,
Street.
neighborhood,
Whatever.
whatever.
Yeah.
Now you need to come up with
Put some
like
restriction, a
num-
limit.
yeah.
Stuff.
Then that's the next thing. I'm just trying to do.
okay, so how many people by show of hands think we should set some type of limit
Limit on what?
on the
You-
number
no,
of transient
No,
units?
what I'm saying is, you're saying one off, well.
No, but we're not getting at that. Right now, we're just saying some type of restriction, and then we're gonna look
So you
at,
mean like,
Well, I think we got enough.
okay, you got enough. So a
There's
cap
enough
for yes.
There's enough for a cap. So then.
Okay,
The next question
so-
is one off, one on.
Yes.
Yes.
How do you get one off?
I have a problem with that only because that's similar to the vehicle code. I've been on that vehicle code for 27 years, not 14 like Guiding Company said, not 20 like what was said here, 27 years personally, no blue sticker. So that one on, one off, I question that as a solution.
It doesn't move.
I mean, pardon me, 27 years I've been on it.
oh my God.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let's be real about that number. That's the real number.
So I think one on, one off would maintain the status quo of whatever we currently have as
It would
far
just
as
keep it at
number.
that cap. We wouldn't
Well,
have any
But then
more.
there's also those few, I mean, I might be off when I'm saying this, but there's also that group of people that have them, don't use them. So what happens to those once they're pulled?
That's a separate question. I'm
Okay.
thinking,
Right, that's what
first
I'm
of all,
gonna
does that, if the general idea has an appeal, do we like it or not? And then the
Okay.
nitty-gritty of it will work out later.
Right.
Okay,
Now, the
so,
only problem might be the scion effect.
I'm sitting back and I'm listening to all this, taking this in, and I think that you're making it too complicated. Perhaps you just want to put a moratorium on it and then get into the weeds.
The moratorium has never gotten support.
How you want to.
So
I'm just, practically speaking, city council has, we brought it up so many times and they say, no.
Yeah.
No.
So we're trying to think of.
If that's different and they give us direction, yeah, we could put a moratorium on it if there's the votes for that. We can do that at the next meeting.
And
but
then you, and then you
but there
work
hasn't
time to work
been,
on it and figure it out.
But
there hasn't been that
It doesn't
support.
work out.
That, look what happened with the golf carts.
And in
That
fact,
kind of blew up, yeah. this
the
blew
last
up.
time that came up, the
And everybody
direction
got
from
it.
the council was planning commission, figure this out. We're giving you the laboring oar
Okay.
to work on a solution
Cap?
for
Yeah.
CUPs, which
Okay.
is what we're doing.
So the one up, one on should be.
So, show of hands, one on, one off.
Okay. Right, okay, that's fine, all right.
I'm going to leave you guys.
You'll regret it.
Thank you, Debbie.
But I want to thank you for the conversation. It's been a really, really good conversation. And like I said, I applaud you for getting the conversation started and getting it going. One other thing before I say goodbye. Also, when you sell a house, it doesn't automatically get the rental permit with it.
It's already in the process.
We're already doing that.
Ms. Wright, before you leave, you're welcome to come to planning so we can discuss the map, and I can personally head down with you.
Chuck's coming to look for it.
Okay, so moving along.
Okay, so then I think the next one is trying to define street or
Streets or
neighborhood.
neighborhoods, do you want us to come back with one concept or both?
I'm thinking of dropping the neighborhoods.
Yeah,
Just because.
streets is simpler.
There's
Streets is a
no
lot.
value added.
Okay.
Streets.
Okay.
Oh,
All right,
That's
well-
number 2.
Bart, you're a no.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so we have direction on saturation.
That's pretty good.
And I'd rather, and
We made
I,
progress tonight.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
anything else on this topic?
No.
We have a latecomer. Do you want to speak on saturation? You sir?
that's Debbie's husband.
Just check.
For his wife.
Okay.
Okay, this next one hopefully is going to be a little bit simpler. So, I'm being hopeful. So, we adopted, are working on our inclusionary housing requirements. Currently, in our inclusionary housing code, let me back up so that everyone is aware, inclusionary housing is when you have to provide affordable housing by a particular formula based on new development. The state has weighed in and put some pretty firm guidelines on cities, statutes on cities, on how you establish inclusionary housing for residential development, if you're building an apartment complex or a condominium complex. Avalon, years ago, took it a step further, because we recognize when new businesses come into Avalon, they create jobs that creates the need for housing, because people can't commute. So Avalon included some language in our inclusionary code that said new commercial development had to provide rental spaces, not necessarily rental dwelling units, for their inclusionary housing obligation. As part of updating our inclusionary housing ordinance, we want to clarify exactly what a rental space is. So we want to get away from it being the top half of a bunk bed.
Or a hotel room.
Or a hotel room. So we are recommending that we utilize our existing single-room occupancy definition, because it's kind of a minimum standard. It requires basic living requirements, a bathroom, possibly a shared kitchen, and that we incorporate that as part of our rental space definition when we bring our inclusionary ordinance back to you.
So in other words, right now, the way it works is if you build a new store and you're required to add spaces, it's for every 2 full-time employees, it's 1 rental space. What does rental space mean? It's not defined, and what some people are using is that they are using hotel rooms for that. And so what this would say is it's got to be something better than a hotel room. So at the minimum, it's going to be a single SRO, single residence unit. It can be more than that, but at the very, very minimum, you know, you're going to have to provide that type of rental unit, and we'll call it. So it's going to solidify what that standard is.
And so this is moving forward?
This is
Not?
well, no, actually, no. It is a definition that would apply to anyone
Currently?
Okay.
Yes.
So this includes dormitories, that, such as
No,
Monkey Town?
that wouldn't, no, because they're not single resident.
If they,
They have to meet the definition
correct.
of it.
So what's going to
So we're
happen?
talking hotel rooms.
No, we're not talking hotel rooms because they don't have a kitchen and bath.
So that wouldn't count as inclusionary.
Correct.
housing. So that way our hotels don't get eaten up by
Correct.
inclusionary housing and the city
Correct.
loses more revenue.
So then what happens when, like, businesses are using hotel rooms right now as their inclusionary housing?
No, wait, now let's back up.
I'm not
They're
saying.
they're not using it as inclusionary housing, they're just using them for employee
Oh,
housing.
okay, because I was going to say that's going to mess everything up.
No.
Number-wise.
No.
Oh.
This is
New development.
new development coming in. You open a store that's in a vacant lot, or at Vaughn's, when we do our
Audit.
of Vaughn's, and it turns out that, gosh, you've got to provide 4 rental spaces. You have to provide a place for those employees to live, and
Hotel's not
You
adding
can't go
rent.
pick up a hotel room. and
Okay.
sleep
you
over
can't
there.
pick up a hotel room if this is in. Now, what you could do is, you could develop new housing. You could put people in single-family resident unit. You could rent apartments for them and just pay the rent, and that's providing
Right.
housing for them.
But that doesn't.
Or you could provide new housing.
Okay.
And we're just trying to say a minimum floor, because right now, a rental space can mean, it's not defined, and we want to define it.
So but what you're saying, according to what Jenny asked, is that this doesn't apply to anything currently being used as single-room occupancy.
We can't
This
do
is
it
all
because
about-
they're already, no, it does apply to existing developments if an audit determines that they have to provide that space. But it doesn't apply to the, existing, like, Island Company who's already built the development's open. But if you're subject to an audit, and 2 entities are, it's the Trailhead Project and the Vaughn's. If you're subject to the audit and this ordinance is in place when that audit comes out,
Then they're going to be
then they're
required
gonna
to
be
create
required
the
to
housing.
create the housing under this.
Just simply out of curiosity, isn't there for single room occupancy units now codes about how those have to be?
No.
Not
Yes.
at all?
No,
So
no, no, no.
For SROs, there are.
We have an SRO
Yes.
ordinance.
Okay.
It's in our special needs
Right.
housing, and we adopted that last year, I believe.
But we don't require that to be used for a singular purpose. What we require that is that if you want to have an SRO, the unit itself has to meet certain minimum requirements.
Okay.
So
It has minimum standards. I'm
I
sorry.
would say, we just say, go with SRO, the definition of SRO for rental space, and the conflict.
It'd be the minimum
Min-
standard.
It's a minimum standard.
Correct, as a
Absolutely.
minimum. But the conflict that was mentioned here about converting CUPs, is that where there's conflict between the 2 sections?
Well, the
And I would think a
conflict,
CUP would count as commercial, because you have a business license as a commercial.
here's the conflict. In the SRO code section, it restricts the conversion of residential properties to SROs. So if someone wanted to take advantage of our inclusionary code that says that you can convert a transient rental to year-round housing and satisfy your inclusionary requirement, they would not be able to convert it to an SRO because the SRO language doesn't allow it. That's the conflict. So,
Isn't the language, though, that has to be a commercial, existing commercial property? And a CUP with a business license, is that not
No.
a commercial property?
no,
Development.
we've
No,
made the finding it's not
a
commercial.
residential unit.
It's a
If
residential
If someone
use.
comes through this process They're getting a CUP for their residential unit.
So the question was, the recommendation was to add the language to the SRO code that says converting residential transient units for purposes of inclusionary housing would be allowed.
Sounds good.
To be
That sounds-
year-round?
Yeah.
meaning?
Yes. Yes.
That sounds great to me, but I do see that may also consider I can't even say that word, having a public hearing.
Right.
And I think whenever we have the ability to have a public hearing, that's what I would go for. Although I agree with what.
To agendizing, yeah, that
Yeah.
is kind of a tongue twister. Yes,
I mean,
it would require
although I
a public
agree with
hearing.
what was just laid out, I think that a public hearing would be the best way to go ahead.
Well, what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring this ordinance, what we're doing is we're having a public hearing for the whole entire ordinance. And then you already have a process by which you are entitled, and the state law says on certain items, we do not have a requirement for a public hearing to prove that you've satisfied your inclusionary housing. If that's what you're getting at, because we can't have a public hearing for SROs, because state law, as I recall this was 3 years ago,
Yeah.
state law says we really want people to develop more housing, and so we're going to say for SRO, you get it over the counter, because if you have to go through this long hearing process, you're less likely to get it. So for this type of development, it's an over-the-counter permit if you meet the requirements of the municipal code.
I have a question. Could you clarify if the island company has to provide? Did you say they did not? They were exempt?
No,
No.
no.
And how
I'm
many
sa-
do they provide right now?
How many inclusionary units do they have?
Yes. If they're like one of the number one employer, how many?
When we
how
did,
many do they provide?
last year, if you recall, we went through and did a big audit for the island company because at one time they had been allowed a housing credit for the bird park housing because they provided the land. And so over a succession of projects, they were gradually eating up that credit. And so, yes, so we did an audit of all their projects up until whatever their last one was this past year. Descanso Beach, and said, okay, and they had to provide us all of their employee data, how their employee count had changed, and we determined that they had, in fact, used up all of their credit up at Bird Park, and they came in and got permission to convert 2 multi-bedroom apartments at Old Tremont into an SRO facility with, I think, 4 to 6 bedrooms, and that satisfied their ultimate requirement of, I believe they had to provide 8 rental spaces.
8 additional rental spaces.
Yeah, additional.
I get
They
the
had to
question
be-
is, how much did they originally have to, how many original units did they have to build? Do you recall what that was?
I don't.
Yeah, we can
Did
have that at the next meeting. It was a substantial amount, but now they're I think they're at 0
Right.
now. So anything that the island company does in terms of an expansion of use or
How about Atwater? How about that? The employees are
that's-
gonna be bringing in for that.
That's not new
That's
development,
exist.
and they actually decreased the number of hotel rooms.
Going back real quick about saturation and the parking issue, you know, a lot of the problems with parking is employees coming down. And then the second part is that we put it all 1 hour to accommodate Vaughn, so that's why Descanso gets it. Everybody else, and then that's not fair to, sure, we can all walk down, but some of us live up above. Other people were coming down, you know, wanted to go fishing, and they're gonna go out for 2-3 hours.
Right.
Or I'm gonna go to a couple stores, I only have 1 hour, now where do I go? I go to where there's no one, and that's part of the saturation part, so that's another parking problem, but
Right.
just wanted to add that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing that there's a consensus.
I have another question
Yes,
about
ma'am.
inclusionary. When the island company converts, which were year-round rentals at Tremont, and converts it to become inclusionary and puts together 2 units, and has 6 people living there, or 8, or?
They took 2 units, they created 8 spaces, so they got a credit for 6.
And does that include a kitchen? Does that
It's
include
a shared,
bathrooms? So that's
there's.
all those people in one bathroom?
My recollection is there's like 2 halves to the building, and each half had a kitchen and a laundry room.
There were 2 buildings.
Right.
Each had 4 bedrooms.
Right.
And they had to have a half bath, so they had to make 2 full baths.
They had to eliminate it, yes, because they were short. And so the planning commission caught that and said, not so fast. And so, again, under the SRO, it's either a bed it's a kitchen and bathroom in each unit, or for bathrooms, I think it's 1 per every 3 units, and for kitchens, it's 1 kitchen for every 6.
And then there was some issue at city council regarding the square footage of the bathrooms, and that became something.
Yeah, and that's what happened is, that's why they had to add, they had to eliminate one of their units.
Right.
Because it was,
And there were dorms at Monkeytown, is that
They
correct?
came in a few years ago and remodeled, I think, most of the units up at Wrigley Terrace Housing and converted them to dormitory type housing for their seasonal staff.
And that's okay?
We had nothing to prohibit them from
yeah, because it said
remodeling
rental
their house.
space, and it didn't define rental space. That's what we're fixing.
So we're trying to correct the word.
Okay?
Right on.
Okay, we have direction, so
We'll
this is
bring-
gonna be,
this will
this is
come
gonna
back.
be just a tiny piece of a giant overall inclusory housing. I think we're shooting for September when Elizabeth Hall, I think we're shooting for September when Elizabeth Hall's gonna be here. She's our housing person.
Can I just say something
I think
super
so, yes.
nerdy? I just want to say that it looks like, I'm so pleased to see that we're addressing some really heavy-duty items and that we're working together. This is arduous work, but we're getting somewhere. And thanks, you guys. Thank you.
Don't
Thank
interrupt,
you.
Paul.
What? Okay, sorry.
Okay, so
All right.
is there any other commissioner business? Anybody have anything they'd like to talk about? No?
You will be seeing in September as well, you'll be seeing the mitigated negative declaration for the Five Corners project.
The carousel.
And I do like to say that I did notice that little ramp in front of
median.
Vaughn's. Yes,
The
I think
median is
that's
in.
definitely helping. And also, I'd like to say, I'm not sure, but Amanda, I drove by the Zane Grey a few times, and I'm having a little bit of concerns regarding the way they keep their job site.
John has had to call them on that a couple of times.
To me, it just seems like it looks like a dump site, and I don't think that that's where we need to be, and it just, doesn't seem like there's any pride, and it just really, that's where visitors come down and
Right.
all the tours, and it's really,
He,
it looks like it could be dangerous as well, pose a
Right.
safety.
And he spoke to them last week, and they took the position that they're kind of stockpiling stuff until they have enough to haul it off.
Yeah, but that's not our problem. I mean, it needs to be addressed.
And yes, he is staying on them about that.
Okay,
But I'll
I
mention
think-
that, well, he's gone for this week, but he'll be back Monday.
Okay, thank you.
And in regards to the Vaughn's Crossing, are those bike racks going to be permanent, or, you know what I mean, the grates that look there?
There's a bike rack on the side of the building, but those handrails.
I'm just
the new
being
handicap access.
On the other
The
side.
things that look like bike
Yeah.
racks are
Yeah.
going to eventually be replaced with something that looks a little nicer. That was just kind of like a temporary barrier to facilitate the safe usage of those new ramps, because there's a step-off point.
Yeah.
But Mr. Greenlaw said that they've ordered something that looks a little nicer.
There will be
So
a
it won't
fence.
look like bike racks.
Was that perpetrated by
By
the
law.
decline?
Right,
Oh,
the
yeah.
incline at those corners were so odd, they had to create a curb and a ramp. And
It
so,
seems kind of awkward to me too, but I guess it's part of ADA.
Yeah.
Because it's like that. That's what I
right,
was figuring out.
the goal was to try to get the ramp in there.
Cindy, did you have a question? Okay.
All right, thank you guys so
All right.
much.
Good night,
Thank
Tony.
you. Bye.
Meeting's adjourned.